Hey everybody, welcome to a very special episode of Pro AV today. We've got an in-studio guest today, someone that I have already learned quite a bit from, and someone that I've met at InfoCon for the first time this year, and that's George Clopp from Korbyt. George, thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, pleasure to be here.
You know, George, one of the things that I really enjoyed about our conversations when we met at InfoCon is that, you know, we talk about things like digital signage, and our AV community tends to have a very not a myopic mindset necessarily, but a very specific thought about what that means. And I think naturally folks want to talk about kiosks and holograms and how can I, do ad impressions here. But I want to talk specifically about applications inside enterprise settings. So offices, even some retail locations that aren't specifically geared towards necessarily audience engagement, but more employee and internal engagement. And I think that's one of the things that really stood out about you guys at Korbyt is that need has existed for a while, and historically, folks have been sticking Raspberry Pis behind their TVs and saying, okay, this will work, I guess.
Right.
But there hasn't really been a lot of intentionality to it. So we'll talk a little bit about that today, and wanted to start off, to kind of get your thoughts on this. When you think about the enterprise, it's tough to even call it digital signage. I struggle even saying that, but we'll call it digital signage inside the enterprise. What are some of the things now that you're seeing folks demand maybe that they weren't even 10, 15 years ago? And obviously, we've got shifting, work relationships, being in office, things like that. But we'll get to that in a minute. But just from a demand standpoint, what are some of the things that folks want to see inside their office?
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand your viewpoint. Even us, when we describe our company and we do our value statement, our value prop, I usually start with we're an employee engagement company, not we're a digital signage company. Our heritage is in digital signage and the workforce over all these years, 40 years. But really at our heart, we're an employee engagement company. And obviously we've seen a lot of trends change. We're in the who's who of the Fortune 100 at their corporate campuses. We're talking to their employees on the brand's behalf. We're trying to create that bond between the brand and the employee. And obviously we've seen trends change in terms of the type of communication you have to your employees, but also the type of gear that's out there. So in terms of the type of content, that pretty much stays the same thing. You want to engage your employees across a bunch of categories. You want them to understand health and safety, wellness. As a brand, we care about you. We care about your career growth. We care about new hires. So everybody's got a different journey. So that cadence of messaging, that creative content, that is kind of staying the same. But what has changed, obviously, is the pandemic changed all of our lives, and now this back to work idea is changing. And what's great about our software and having that communication, having those signs in the office is it gives the company a chance to really get that message out there and not be quiet about this ever-changing landscape that we're all going through right now.
Well, what's interesting too, I love that you kind of mentioned that in the idea of content on a screen has not really changed, right? And that is there is something that's got to go on a display, right? At the end of the day. But the data sets and the information has changed, right? Maybe, we even look at the hybrid work schedule. Here are the desks that are available. Here's what the forecast is. Here's what today's work schedule looks like. Here's who's in office today. Right. What are some of those newer data sets that you're seeing, especially post-pandemic, that folks are asking for?
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, that's where we really think we've got a differentiator in the marketplace is we've got those enterprise real-time data adapters to things like calendaring, emergency notification systems, more boring things like supply chain and CRM and things of that nature. So it's really about sending an entire stream of content to that employee, something that helps their performance, like, hey, if you're in sales, this is pipeline, this is your weekly target, this is your monthly target, but not to just have that up there statically all day long, have that rotate in, hey, this is our wellness approach, or hey, you need to sign up for 401k, or there's yoga in the building, just different categories of content, maybe even your favorite sports teams, different tickers. There's all kinds of things we can do with content. But the idea there is everybody has attention deficit disorder, Instagram, TikTok, things of that nature. So you really want that fresh new content up there for 5 to 30 seconds and then switching it around. But the enterprise real-time data, that's part of that, right? And it depends on the use case. Some of our use cases are if you're at a supply chain dock, for the most part, you're going to have those stats up there all the time. They're real time. But The cool thing that we can do with our software too is we can orchestrate a different experience based on the data. So again, if you've got too many calls in queue or your truck is late for the dock or something like that, we can change that entire screen experience, alert the employee. And then when everything's going back to normal, we can go back to nice content like, hey, join the soccer team.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I like that responsiveness too. And I think, one of the questions I hear IT folks yelling at me already is, I've got my Salesforce and I've got my HubSpot and I've got all these employee intranets that I, don't have APIs and can't figure out how to get data out of, right? That even in our office, right? That's one of the biggest challenges. We have so many different data sets that it just is nearly impossible to get them all in one place. What would your advice be for somebody who's looking to roll out a solution like this and find ways to actually implement real-time CRM, real-time, call logs, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, we've got close to 200 real-time data integrations. So if it's got an API, if it's got some way to connect to it, even if it's a file export, we can do that. And then the power behind it is like, hey, why don't I just put Salesforce dashboard and connect that up to a screen? You get it centrally managed, and you also get zone takeover. So you might not want your Salesforce dashboard to take up the entire screen. You might want it to just take up one particular zone. You have other employee engagement content in another zone, another ticker in another zone. Gives you a lot of creative options. And then you get that true enterprise experience when those zones flip and change based off that real-time data.
Yeah, and one of the things that kind of jumps out, especially I'm gonna use a 4-letter word for a lot of people in the industry. That's AI. You love it, hate it, you sort of adapt it, you don't. There's a conversation to be had even beyond just real-time data. What are some of the ways that you're seeing AI being leveraged, right? That's the most generic question I feel like I've ever asked in my life, but I don't have the answer for it. You do.
Yeah. I mean, ChatGPT set the world on fire. Everyone hears about generative AI. I watch a lot of CNBC. They're always talking about generative AI, using it sometimes in the correct context, sometimes not so correct. We were actually some pioneers. We created a recommendation engine based off of AI in 2018. We call that machine learning broadcast, but we're really trying to stay at the forefront of it. And our goal, our business goal with AI is really, this stuff is hard to get employees to stay engaged, to get fresh content out there, to make sure that content's targeted to the right people, and it actually improves their performance, makes them feel better connected to the brand. That's really hard. You do broadcast schedules. It's okay to do maybe your first week. It's pretty arduous. You start getting into a second week, third week, fourth week. That's really where we see the promise of AI is we can actually let the machine go ahead and schedule content across categories, learn from how that employee is interacting across channels, not just digital signage, and then change the content and learn to make content more appropriate to George, more appropriate to David, more appropriate to everybody.
Well, how does that apply to personalization, right? So I think, at least in my mind, I'm thinking, even an office like ours, you walk around and every 45 feet there's a TV, right? But how do we actually get to a level of true personalization on an individual level? Is it on the computer monitor? Is it on the cell phone? How does that apply?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of both. I mean, digital signage is a tough channel. Like, we're an omni-channel platform. The reason why signage is tough is kind of spray and pray TV. It's like, hey, I know this TV is on the 5th floor, the 53rd floor. It's near the break room. I kind of know the finance department's over there, so I can make some content associated with the finance department, but I don't know that George is in front of that. But on the desktop, on the mobile device, on the web, we know you sign in, we know exactly who you are. So that's why signage has been tough. But usually it's geolocated. That helps us go ahead and at least assign content at a department level. It might not be at my personal level, but at least at a department level, what content's good for you. And again, with our AI innovations, we're going to be learning from who's actually watching that content, or if you're on your own computer using our desktop product, who's actually, where are people clicking, what content are they looking at? And then another big thing to say about content, which is really important with this AI, is it helps you get across your mission, vision, and goals. Like, one of the things we've seen across our customer base is our customers aren't really messaging out departmental goals, departmental KPIs, things of that nature. And you don't want to stick that in your employee's face all day long, but you do need a gentle reminder of like, hey, this is the company, this is what we're doing for the environment, this is how we're helping out our community, this is what we're doing for you. And oh, by the way, this week, this is your sales goal. In the finance department, you guys need to close your accounts receivables 3 days early, something like that. So that's another great thing that AI is doing for us.
Well, you talked about the web browser and some personal tools, cell phones, laptops, things like that. That opens the door for out of office, right? That remote work experience. How do you translate the employee engagement digital signage side with okay, this person's at home? Is it, hey, this is going to be your homepage? Is it, what does that look like?
Yeah, great question. The modern workforce and the back to work is all changing. It's changing dynamically. Ideally, we just want a little piece of real estate on their desktop, whether it's web or our desktop product, that can keep them engaged with what's going on back at the corporate center. Obviously, once they get back to the corporate campus, that's where the signage takes over, and we want to, reinforce. It's always about reinforcing messages, making sure we're not getting attention deficit disorder, but at the same time, also making sure those messages are reinforced. But yeah, we've got a desktop product that can really be sized to any form factor you like. It can actually be made circular. It can be in the top right-hand corner of the screen. It can be a small little web sliver that's over here. It works well for engagement, also works well for remote contact center employees too.
So what do you think about rolling something like this out? Say I was to roll it out here at our office. Who typically is the individual operator of that? Is this an HR thing? Is this an ops thing? Who typically is collaborating, building that content, assigning it? Where does that normally live?
Yeah, that's some of the challenges too, because it is multifunctional. So we look at the personas of our buyers. A lot of times it is the AV world, but now we're seeing that move over into people and culture, HR, the communications department. So in order for us to get a sell, we usually have to cross-sell across all those individuals, and then we've got to put like a proper enterprise project plan in place to make sure that we get a good rollout. Because that's really important to us, obviously, for repeat sales and continue ARR. Is we want the solution to be impactful, have a demonstrable effect on performance, make your employees feel less likely to leave the company. So having that really good rollout, super important, because you got to deal with details like cables and transmission equipment and certain screen sizes and players, but you also got to deal with the content. Right. So everything from content down to the cables.
I think you just laid out really nicely one of our biggest challenges as an AV community is that our decision-making profile has changed.
Yeah.
It used to be very clear who your AV buyer was, and now your HR team might be buying, the digital signage tools because they need to share out messaging with the office, or maybe it's emergency alerts, things like that, things that historically technology was much harder to achieve. Now technology has become so easy to use that it's enabled that. What are some of the things, if you had to punt 5-10 years down the road, what are some of the changes that you expect to continue to see on the employee engagement digital signage side?
Definitely more AI. AI based on not just generative AI that's like, hey, you describe an image or you describe a video and it pops up the video, but more particular to your company. I know Microsoft with their Copilot, they talk a lot about their LLMs or large language models being proprietary to a company. So MetLife would have an LLM and Nike would have an LLM. So we'll probably start seeing more of that. And then the employee engagement side tapping into the fabric and the DNA of that company. What differentiates MetLife from Nike? So it'll get more and more hyper-personalized over time.
Well, George, I love that we landed the plane with that, because I always love to say, if our technology is not serving our end users and driving outcomes, and our technology is technology for its own sake, right? And as our industries continue to evolve, whether it's on the signage side, the hardware manufacturer side, the integrator side, wherever, our industry continues to focus a little bit more towards that end user experience and outcomes. I think that is going to continue to drive.
Absolutely.
Well, George, we appreciate you coming on today and hanging out. You can't see the great view today. It's a little bit rainy, but we'll take it. But we appreciate you tuning into Pro AV today as well, and we'll see you next time.